Hello everybody, thank you for joining us for our latest Mobile Expert Interview. I'm Bridget Romaines from Mobile Relocation, and today we're going to be talking about Managed Isolation, or MIQ. This Mobile Expert interview series is designed to ensure that people who are relocating to New Zealand receive accurate and authoritative information on some of the really complicated parts of moving to another country. Previous experts interviews we've done include how to bring your non-Kiwi partner and family to New Zealand, coping with reverse culture shock, and a number of other topics of interest to returning Kiwis. This time round, we've also collaborated with Kia New Zealand to crowdsource questions on MIQ because we know it's a topic of great interest to returning Kiwis. So you'll hear your questions either asked directly or included in the general questions we asked today of Megan. So firstly, Megan, lovely of you to come along and join us today to discuss MIQ planning. Megan leads the team that's responsible for New Zealand's MIQ facilities. Now, this is a really complex job, as you can imagine. She needs to take into account the health and science behind the MIQ provision. It's also a matter of managing the logistics for around 150,000 people so far who've been through the facilities. And finally, it's taking care of the well-being of those people while they're confined to hotel rooms for 2 weeks at a time. Megan has extensive senior level private and public sector and health sector experience in both New Zealand and Australia. What you might not know about Megan is that she's actually an expat herself. I was lucky enough to meet Megan and her family when they relocated to New Zealand from Australia when Megan took up the role of Chief Executives at New Zealand Health Partnerships. So she knows what it's like from a personal level to be facing the challenges of COVID when you're living outside your home country and it's difficult to return. So welcome, Megan, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to start with some basic informational questions about MIQ. Can you just explain to us how the MIQ booking system works? And in particular, one of the things that people ask us, is there a particular date I need to be watching out for each month when the slots are released, or is there a particular time of day? How does the whole thing work?
Thanks, Bridget. It's great to be able to talk to you about MIQ. MIQ didn't exist a bit over a year ago. So everything that I talk about, we've had to create. There certainly wasn't a playbook for how to set up and run a 4,500 room managed isolation quarantine system with all of the associated processes. When we think back to when the borders were closing in New Zealand and other countries, 16 months or so ago, it was quite surreal. So New Zealand, is quite, as a country, I think we're quite proud of how we've responded to COVID. We all made considerable sacrifices last year when we went into what was, I think, the most extreme lockdown of any country. And today we live in a remarkably, relatively sort of normal world, whatever normal is post-COVID. So MIQ is part of that. We've got facilities in 5 cities around the country where you spend 14 days on arrival. The exception to that is where we've got quarantine-free travel, which at the moment is with Australia and the Cook Islands. And for everybody else, you come in and you do 14 days managed isolation. While you're in there, you will get tested at least 3 times. You'll have daily health checks. You'll have daily times where you can go out and get fresh air. And other than that, you'll be quite constrained in your room with your meals delivered to you. So quite a confronting experience for a lot of people, apart from the odd introvert who thinks it sounds like heaven, but perhaps they're not doing that with their families. And so, to your question around how do you get that voucher, one of the challenges we've had all along is supply exceeding, demand exceeding supply. Of course, I always get that round the wrong way. So we've got 31 facilities, but most of the time we've had more people wanting to come back than we've had space. We also have a portion set aside of 10% for critical workers, and the rest is for New Zealand citizens, permanent residents and their families, as well as people with critical worker visas. So we don't release vouchers on a set day at a set time. We release them about 4 to 6 months in advance, and that's a longer lead time now as airline schedules are becoming more certain again. But if we don't have firm airline schedules, we can't release the vouchers to match those flights. And then we're releasing them in staggered releases, roughly every week or two, and at different times of day to meet different time zones. And so my advice to people who are trying to get a voucher is check regularly, because if there are no vouchers now, we'll be releasing more within the next 2 weeks. And as it gets closer to time, we release more vouchers. So at the moment, all of July has been released, but only a portion of August, September, October. And we're hoping to release November and December quite soon. So if you go online and you see there's nothing available till November, don't think that means there are no more vouchers to be released. Just keep checking. The other advice I'd give is be flexible with your travel dates. You know, you might be hoping for a particular date, but go for what's available nearby.
Yeah, I think that segues nicely into my next question in terms of October being already booked, because I know there are a lot of people who are planning to come back for Christmas, and some of them are freaking out at the fact that October's already booked out and November and December haven't even been released yet. So, you know, last year, the demand over the Christmas and summer period was exponential. You know, there's a lot of publicity about that. Obviously, we've now had a year to learn from that, and also to make some anticipation of what the demand might be like for this summer. Are you anticipating that there will be that huge demand again? Have more spaces been made available? And, you know, what's your advice to people who are listening, who are either planning to relocate back permanently before Christmas, you know, with the idea of having summer and the kids start school, or people who are just coming back for a break, but looking to be here in those last sort of 3 months of the year?
Yes, so we did see a huge increase in demand in the lead up to Christmas last year, and it started earlier than we expected. It actually kicked in October, and I suspect we'll see something similar this year. So even QFT has taken out, obviously, the Australian demand, and that was roughly a quarter of our demand for MIQ. Some of that, a portion of that's been set aside for contingency for if anything happens to the bubble with Australia, but the rest is being put back into the system. And we've done some modelling looking at last year's demand and forecasting what it might be this year. And, you know, there's no two ways around it. Demand looks like it's going to be quite high again leading into Christmas. So I would come back to really encouraging people to be very flexible with their dates. Come back early, or maybe wait till after Christmas. It's really interesting. We saw demand for people to arrive in New Zealand on Christmas Day was really low. And so obviously people took that as an arrival date, and their comments were that they'd had a very memorable Christmas, one they'd remember forever, spending it in MIQ. So yeah, be a bit flexible around that particular day of Christmas Day would be my advice.
Yeah, that's a nice thought, putting a positive spin on it. You mentioned the Australian travel bubble before. We had a few questions around how much that has increased capacity, and particularly whether the increased capacity has meant more choice for people. You know, are they able now to, or is the system able now to put families into hotels that have a bit more outdoor space, for example, or are individuals able to choose which city they want to quarantine in? Have there been any changes in that sort of choice area?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that really. One is, has QFT helped with capacity and that supply-demand challenge? And I guess the other is, have we changed the model for choosing where you go? So on the capacity side, interestingly, the introduction of quarantine-free travel coincided with some changes that we made in response to airborne transmission and the variants of concern, where we took a more cautious approach. There were also some changes to the flow of people from very high-risk countries at the same time. And so everything we do is based on public health advice and on making sure that we enable as many people to come back as we can while keeping our returnees, our workers, and the New Zealand community safe from COVID. So that is the absolute non-negotiable in all of this. And so around the same time as quarantine-free travel, we introduced cohorting. which means groups of flights come into a facility together, and then no more people come into that facility until that first group's left, so that we're not mixing people at the start of their stay with the end of their stay. And that's to help keep people safe. What we don't want is someone at the end of their stay being exposed to COVID and taking it out into the community. So that's impacted on our capacity, as well as having some extra contingency set aside for if something happens with quarantine-free travel, as we've seen a few times over the last couple of months when we've had bubble pauses and what have you. So the supply and demand balance is still quite challenging, even with having the Australians able to travel more freely. But we're still trying to get as many rooms available as we can for people to book. To the other part of your question, we don't give people the choice of which facility they go into. And that's largely because, we want to make sure that people are kept safe, whatever MIQ facility they're in. So wherever you go, you'll get looked after the same, with the same care and concern and the same support, the same health protocols around your stay. We do have direct flights now into Christchurch. So for people looking to get to Christchurch, look out for that Singapore Christchurch direct flight. But otherwise, we will, if you end up in another city, we'll return you to Auckland if that's where you want to go, or you can stay in the city that you ended up in, whether that's Wellington, Christchurch, Hamilton, or Rotorua. And so we try to make that as smooth as possible. But as you can imagine, with up to 6,000 people coming in every 2 weeks, it's enough of a logistical exercise to match individuals and couples and families to our rooms without trying to match arrival cities, and make sure that we're utilising our capacity as well as we can. So it's we call it the Tetris of trying to keep our utilisation as high as we can.
Sure. I'd like to move on to families now. Obviously the thought of spending 2 weeks in a hotel room with young children in particular, is quite challenging for many parents. I'm interested to hear how MIQ support families, and in particular, specific questions. With one family who has a new baby and a toddler, and they're wondering, can they have 2 hotel rooms? Another family who has a baby who's weaning. They've ticked baby food on the form, but what does that actually mean? Will they be able to get what they specifically need for the child at the stage that their child is at? Can you help us with reassuring families or giving them a bit more information about how things work to meet their needs?
So we've had a lot of families through MIQ. We've had a lot of children through. They certainly bring a different energy into the facilities. And the staff working in the facilities do an amazing job of supporting the kids, but probably more importantly, the parents, to get through those 14 days. And it varies by region in terms of what they do, but there's often little welcome packs with the child's name on it, age appropriate small toys or things to give the kids. In some of the facilities, they get their own special little bubble wand when they have their swab, just to make it a bit of fun, chalk to be able to write it on the ground outside during their outdoor time. And so, we recognise it's a particular challenge when travelling with young kids, although also possibly with older kids. And we want to make it as comfortable as possible, for everybody that goes through MIQ, but especially our families with kids. There are strict requirements on what's allowed in the facilities, and we try to make it really clear to parents to be really careful about their children not interacting with other children in other bubbles. We recognise that can be tough at times, but again, we will do things like stagger the outdoor time so little kids aren't tempted to play with other little kids, because we know it's tough, and we know human beings want to be together. So it's just a case of, I think, planning ahead. What people tell me is that they find having a routine is really important. Have a routine in the day around your meals, your outdoor time. schoolwork if that's appropriate, but and a countdown to when you're leaving, to try and make it as much of an adventure as possible.
Mm. And in terms of the food side of things, is there any way that families can get a bit more specific about what they need? I'm aware there's, various tick boxes that you fill in. Is there some way they can sort of add an extra detail on that? And can the hotels be receptive to that too, I suppose? It's the other part of
Yeah, so all of the facilities provide food that's suitable for children, and they can also help with food for babies as well. And they will be really keen to help. The more advance notice they have, the better. So when you register in MIQ, the online booking system, there's a space there to put in additional information about any special requirements. So make sure you call it out there if there's particular food you need. That's also where you can flag things like needing, say, a wheelchair-friendly room or anything else that will help make your stay more comfortable. I wouldn't encourage people to do what someone did, which is to say they wanted a grand piano in their room. I mean, that's a bit of fun, but we do use that field for really getting the information we need to support people. And just communicate with the facility when you get there. If you're concerned about anything, just raise it with the staff on site.
Okay. And we had another related question on food too from a person who's on a specific medical diet. Again, they would put that in quite a lot of detail into the comments box.
Yes, absolutely. And, and again, we're 150,000 people. It's not at all uncommon to have people with special dietary requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So one of the most prevalent questions we had in our crowdsourced questions was around what we're calling vaccination versus MIQ. There are a lot of people out there now, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, who have vaccines freely available and they've taken advantage of that. They're vaccinated themselves, they're traveling around Europe or within the US quite freely. They're sort of asking questions like, we're seeing unvaccinated Australians come into New Zealand, yet we still have to come in and do MIQ. What's the science behind that?
Yeah.
Another Kiwi looking to return back mentioned that in Germany now vaccinated travellers only have to do a 3-day isolation, so they have a special provision for them. What can you tell us about when and how MIQ requirements might be changing for people who have the vaccination already under their belt and are coming back to New Zealand?
Yeah, so one thing for sure about COVID is it's adapting and evolving quite quickly, and our response to it needs to adapt and evolve as well. And we're doing things now that we weren't doing a year ago. We weren't doing day 0 test or pre-departure testing a year ago. We also didn't have quarantine-free travel with Australia and the Cook Islands a year ago. So our response will continue to adapt, but it will always be based on the best public health advice. And everything we do in MIQ is based on that public health advice that we then operationalise. And at the moment, the best science is saying that for New Zealand and the position we're in, where we don't have COVID in the community, at this stage, all arrivals other than from quarantine-free travel zones do need to do their 14 days managed isolation. And, I fully expect that we will continue to adapt and evolve. And I know that our scientific experts and public health experts are very well connected to what's going on in other countries and watching that really closely and having those conversations. So I have every confidence that we'll continue to adapt. But at the moment, it's 14 days in MIQ when you arrive. And I suspect that will be the case for the foreseeable future. And so if people are thinking about, coming at Christmas, I would be planning on having the 14 days in MIQ. And if something changes before then, I'd consider that a bit of a bonus.
Yeah, I think that is a realistic message and similar to the one that we've been given people too, based on just the publicly available information that, don't expect it not to be in place over the next few months, given.
Yeah, look, I'd say, I've never been in a job where I've hoped so much to put myself out of work. We've had a lot of firsts in MIQ, but it feels like, we'll be here for a little while yet.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so all those people planning to come back for Christmas assume that the 2 weeks will be waiting for you when you get here. Finally, are there any other key messages you'd like to share about MIQ, and particularly for people who are planning, wanting to know what to expect, what they need to bring, all those things that are top of mind when you're moving into a completely novel and unknown situation?
Yeah. There's a couple of things, Bridget. One is, and we've touched on this. There's information out there that will help you to prepare. Have a look at the MIQ website. There's quite a bit of information there, as well as links to our booking system, NEAS, but also links to how you can apply if you need to get here really quickly through our emergency allocation process. If you are looking for an exemption for managed isolation and quarantine, or if you're looking for a fee waiver based on financial hardship or humanitarian grounds, you can find all of that on MEAS. And shortly we'll also have a video there that helps you to get a sense of what happens when you arrive. It's a video that will walk you through the experience. But in the meantime, what we do have on our website is our welcome pack. You'll get one on arrival, but it's also, the full pack is on our website and has a lot of information in it about what to expect, how to prepare, contact details, all the useful sort of information around what to do, but also some of the why. When you come through MIQ, we'll be asking you to do things that you probably never imagined you'd be doing. Things like before you open the door of your room, put your mask on and make sure your window's closed. And this is all to keep you safe, but also to keep our workforce safe, and to keep the New Zealand community safe. So the welcome pack will help you to prepare for that. You'll also get some information in flight and on arrival. What we know is the more information people have before they get here, the easier the experience is. I wouldn't necessarily say it's more fun, but it's easier because you know what to expect, and you can come into it prepared.
Yeah, I'd certainly endorse that based on the experience of our clients. So you can just download that welcome pack
Yes.
From the website quite easily. Perfect. So finally, Megan, what's the best way for people to contact your team if they've got any further questions or need more information about MIQ? We've talked about the comments box when they're doing their booking, which is specific information about their particular requirements, but are there other avenues where people can get more information and help from your team?
So we've also got a contact centre that can be reached either by phone or by email. And it's not 24/7 phone, but it is extended hours to suit people in other time zones other than New Zealand, which is probably where you'll be calling from. And if you go to the MIQ website, miq.govt.nz, the links are there for either emailing or phoning, as well as I say, those other forms that you can just go straight in and enter your information in. That's all linked up, so you only need to enter that information once if there's different things you need to do, and then your journey to MIQ begins.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today, Megan. I really appreciate it, and I think the information you've given and also the further resources that people can get for themselves is really going to help with the planning that many, many Kiwis are doing offshore right now. I'd like to invite anyone who's interested, if they'd like to have a look at our website, www.mobile-relocation.com. There's further examples of our expert interviews there, and this will also be posted there. If you found it somewhere else, you can share the link with your friends too. So thanks again, Megan, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you, our listeners, on our next Mobile Expert Interview. Thank you.